But someone just said to me, in looking here at this is awesome. It's a word I don't use very often, but it's a good word here for this moment here. It is so great to see something happening again. It's been a year and a half, and it's just so important to retain and to reach back and reach out for some connection to this Chico community, and to try to re-engage ourselves there with our storyline here in Chico, and to try to find a way forward here at this point. Things have certainly shifted under our feet over the last number of years, and we've lived through a period that will be truly looked back at, hopefully with people in the future, as an historical moment here in the story of the United States of America and the globe, our planet. So anyway, it's good to be back here. Just a few words of thanks here. Certainly, right as the virus began to close down here a year and a half ago, we were able to put the pieces of this together, this beautiful big screen, and a number of our members contributed most of the money toward that. And then this motorized stand here, which Ray Rolls and Don Alger contributed, bought the thing for the Chico Museum. So we're really so excited to have this set up here. And again, it's got a motor that lifts or descends the screen there, but even if we were to put that down on the ground and elevate the screen up high there, it just wasn't high enough, so we built the box there. It's on wheels, we can move it around, it's going to be great for us. I'd also really like to say thank you and just my words of respect for this Chico History Museum board that has stayed the course and did not fade, and has stayed here and actually moved this museum forward a little bit. We've actually been kind of busy over the last year and a half here with projects, and the great Barth fish, we've got that here in the museum now, and there's a good story to go with that. It was such a Chico icon for decades, and then it disappeared and was out of commission there in somebody's patio for about 30 plus years, and then it kind of came out of the closet and resurfaced and came back into the public there, and the Barth family has got that on long-term loan here with us, so that's really great. I think that is really what I wanted to say as far as thanks go. And we've got a very good fall program on tap here for the rest of the fall, a fall lecture series. I think we've got 6 more events here in the fall, as well as possibly a special event that we're talking about now. But you can get tickets for that fall lecture series. We're selling season tickets for that, and those will all be held right here in the museum at 10 o'clock on Saturday mornings. So I'm going to go ahead and step into my program. I'm Dave Nopel, and I'm going to, what did I do with it? Here. I've got to ring these bells. Got to ring these bells. And these are 2 of my favorite things that have come to me from my own personal family past. These were the team bells for the Bell family. And some of you have probably seen or been on Bell Road west of Chico, the same family that was here in Butte County as early as 1864. So, and their first 2 children were born along the Humboldt Road there. One of them so small that she was carried around in a shoebox. But here's their team bells, so no doubt these have been up and down that road, and I'm ringing them in case anybody can hear that we have all not faded away yet. We're still kicking around. And so there. So I'm going to start here with this beautiful picture. And it really says to me, Humboldt Road yesterday and today. And this was a re-photograph created by the Chico State professor Byron Wolfe back in about 2013, after he had found out where this historic photo was taken, probably the single most distinctive photograph taken along the Humboldt Road in times past. He went right back to the same spot where this photograph was taken originally, lined all the rocks up using GPS satellite technology, and then about a $20,000 digital camera, taking a number of photographs across and then stitching those all together. So here, of course, you see, we're looking right down into Bidwell Park here. Here's Salmon Hole coming right down into the bottom of the Creek Canyon, and Chico out here somewhere. And again, we'll see this configuration several times today. So remember this rock right here. How is it, again, that it came to me to stand up here and tell you the story of the Humboldt Road? I rang the bells. I show you the picture of myself here and my brother and sister standing on the collapsed barn there at Forest Ranch in about 1953. So we'll see again this same barn here when it was in its heyday, literally holding hay. And in 53, it was fading away there. But my, yeah, I forgot about that. Okay. My father had family there in Forest Ranch. And his grandfather had come to Forest Ranch in 1888 and built this cabin here. It's interesting, of course, to look back and consider that somebody would find that adequate shelter, considering our today's world. It's important to remember, yeah, people didn't used to live in these giant houses that we've got today. They had smaller shelters, and we're probably thankful for it. So my dad had family there, and so they were still there when I was a boy, and so we were often up and down the old road to visit family members that were still living in Forest Ranch. My dad's dad here, and two of his sisters, two of his aunts there, and his uncle. So again, to kind of put a spotlight on my dad for just a minute there, this is just a handful of the things that he collected over the years. The Humboldt Road became an important little focus for him as he put together pictures and information on the road. And I want to thank him for that effort. And it really led to this. In 2011, Marty Lester and I teamed up to put together this book, The Humboldt Wagon Road, using a lot of pictures and information my dad had. It's been a successful book, and we have it for sale here at the museum. But yeah, the story of the Humboldt Road really has to start here. And again, we can see in this great picture what that road was all about. The dust, the iron-rimmed wheels there for these wagons, the horses and mules that pull these wagons up and down these mountains. And of course, we all owe a debt of gratitude to them for all of our human past there and our contribution to our human story by our domesticated animals there. So we'd look at this and we go, yeah, that's an old picture, and yeah, that's quite a quaint image there. Most of that's all gone, of course, but not really. For the first 30 miles out of Chico, Today's Highway 32 follows essentially that old Humboldt Wagon Road route, right up the ridgetop between Big Chico and Little Chico. So really, we're going to start our story here back at the beginnings of the Humboldt Wagon Road. Here's a freight team going through Butte Meadows here, probably about 1880. So you've got your main wagon and 2 trailer wagons. You can see these animals have got their bells there on them. That was really important in traveling along the road, going around the turns in the road there. It was important to hear whether someone was coming, whether someone might be coming toward you. If you were to meet, and you were too close, it's really hard to back up, if not impossible. So again, they say that different teamsters had different bells that gave different sounds, and it was quite a musical show there as a team came up the road. So really the story of the Humboldt Wagon Road in its beginnings came out of John Bidwell. Most of us are familiar with Bidwell. This picture of him about 1860, he would have been about 40 at that point, about the time that he began to give shape to the Humboldt Road. But of course, the Bidwell story had started here in California another 20 years before. Bidwell had come into California in 1841, one of the first white-skinned people to come overland into California. Bidwell would hear about the gold discovery on the American River there just weeks after that took place in January 1848. So Bidwell would quickly organize a group of American people here in the Upper Valley, and they would go over to the Feather River. If there's gold on the American River, maybe there's gold in the Feather. And so they went and found. And at Bidwell Bar, what became known as Bidwell Bar, I believe the second county seat for Butte County, Bidwell would find lots of gold on the surface sands there of this big sand and gravel bar at Bidwell Bar, and he would pick up and rake up a fortune in gold. He would quickly move to what he really wanted to do, become a farmer. So he would purchase about 30,000 acres of land right here in the Chico area, including the entire Mexican-era land grant that had been given in 1844 to another American, William Dickey. And that land grant was all on the north side of Chico Creek. We're just a stone's throw, a shouting distance from this spot here, where you'd cross the Esplanade Bridge here today and head out on the Esplanade. We're down here about where the upper crust is downtown, and we're looking across Chico Creek, which is coming right here, and the Bidwell Mansion would be in here somewhere. And this was really the beginnings of the community we have today here in Chico. This was the cluster of buildings that Bidwell put together as he began to develop his Rancho Chico. He had wanted to be a farmer, and so he went to doing that. And he spent the decade of the 1850s in developing his rancho. Here's his prized young cherry orchard, right about where today's Kendall and Laxon and Trinity Halls there on the Chico State campus are there. This would be given by Bidwell to the state there in 1887-88 to begin the Chico State Normal School. And of course, by 1860, an abundant harvest is pouring out of the Bidwell Ranch. And he's really curtailed there by not being able to move this growing harvest of goods very far there. What do you do with it? No trains yet. So now Bidwell envisions this Humboldt Wagon Road. 1859, silver had been found here at the Humboldt mines in today's Nevada. It would be the biggest mineral strike in the United States right below the California gold rush. It would be very big, a lot of wealth. So Bidwell envisions building a 100-mile road here from Chico to Susanville. And at Susanville, you could tie into the number of existing wagon roads across Nevada and get provisions, supplies, and people out into the mine area, and quickly a second strike up here in southern Idaho. So Bidwell conceives of this. He surveys the road. He's probably already been over most of it. He raises the money for it. In 1864, Bidwell and several investors put together their Humboldt Wagon Road Company. And they're going to spend about $40,000 in those days' money, which was considerable, and make this trail over the mountains into a wagon-ready road. And then the state of California has given these investors a franchise where they can charge a toll for use of the road, and that way the investors could hopefully remake the money. So Bidwell envisions that supplies can come up the river from San Francisco and Sacramento. They'd be offloaded at Chico Landing on the Sacramento River, right about where Sacramento Avenue goes down and hits the river today. And you'd bring those supplies in here to this spot, which quickly became called the Junction. And today, of course, we all know this spot at the southern end of the downtown, where here's Main Street here, and down this way, and then hook back Broadway, and this area here where a number of different roads come in. And this became the real head of the Humboldt Wagon Road. Here we see the Chico Hotel, which stood right there where that last gas station is in the downtown, that Arco station. And I want you to take note of that big open space there. We'll see that again. So that Chico Hotel, quite a spot. Quickly the Junction became quite a commercial and industrial area. It's been called Chico's first industrial area, where blacksmith shops and foundries, carriage making all went on. Here's that big open spot there. Here's the Chico Hotel. So you needed that big open spot there to maneuver teams like that. I can almost feel sorry for that group of mules over there. Oh baby, they're in for it. Trying to pull that uphill. Okay. Again, just a handful of images from that Junction area. There were corrals, laundries, restaurants, saloons, a brewery even, and this building, of course, is still there right at the corner of 8th and Broadway today, the famous Jeffrey blacksmith shop. So again, the Junction really was ahead of the Humboldt Road. And of course today, if we were right there, we see that that big open space has been given over to these Junction Park. There's several little triangles there. They say there was a water trough there in the middle, and that would become a horrendous mud hole there, and a cesspool of animal poop, a real mess, and it belonged to no one, so no one cleaned it up, and it was quite a mess there. And of course, it's still kind of a junction today where a number of roads come together, and we've all probably been through here. So we're going to start our trip up the road. You'll see here Humboldt Avenue. What happened to Humboldt Road? Well, in 1964-65, when the Highway 99 freeway bypass took Highway 99 out of downtown Chico and ran it there to the east of the downtown, it cut right across the Humboldt Road. and blocked it. There's no underpass there on the Humboldt Road at the freeway. And so we've got Humboldt Avenue on the west side of the freeway, Humboldt Road on the east side. That's for emergency responders. You get a call for the Humboldt Avenue, you know it's there on the west side of the freeway. So if we start up the road, we'll see out here where Forest Avenue cuts this way in the Humboldt Road here. It looks pretty spiffy, yeah. You know, it's entered the 21st century. But if we go out to the edge of Chico where Bruce Road, here it is, cutting across there, you see old and new. You'll see the old wooden fence posts, the tangle of barbed wire from the days when cows grazed out here, and the remnants of the old rock wall that lined Bruce Road and the Humboldt Road. And you'll see what's left of the old city dump here. So again, right there at the Humboldt Road, if you were to proceed, and here goes the road, headed east, if we went up that way, we'd soon hit this. This is a great stretch of the old road. Some of you have probably driven it. It's really deteriorating. It had become a spot of questionable behavior up here. And also, people had been driving in and carting away the rocks from the old stone rock wall there. And they had been driving on the wagon ruts that had been worn into the rock right here. You can still see them. So the road just within the last 6 months to a year has been closed for now as the city of Chico tries to see what it's going to do as development really comes into place, probably there on both sides of the old road. So again, we see in this map from the Chico News and Review, in the days of the Humboldt Wagon Road, there were quite a number of stopping places that were put into place immediately as the road opened up. You needed spots where animals could get water, where they could get food, where people could stop and stay overnight and get food themselves. And so these spots were put into place by the original investors, and then most of them were put into place by the original investors, and then soon use of the road would swell beyond control of those investors, and really others would establish spots along the way. We're going to look at some of these. So again, if we headed east right out of Chico, we'd come to that spot where this historic photo was taken. You see this really distinctive rock here again. Today, you can walk right there and find that spot. And it's in Bidwell Park. This is part of today's Bidwell Park, 1994-5. The city of Chico purchased from landowners I think a 1,600 acre parcel here on the south side of Chico Creek. So down here at the bottom, Chico Creek, Bidwell Park on the north side. Now as development really begins to encroach on Upper Park, the city purchases this in a controversial sale, and all of this became part of today's Bidwell Park. Again, right there at that same spot, you can't see that distinctive rock. Here it is. We're right back there at that same spot. You see the old embankment work that had to happen. It's still there. And you can walk there and take a look.
Dave?
Yeah?
How far is it from the gate to right there?
From the green gate?
Where the gate is closed, where the road is closed now.
Well, yeah. I'd say you can park right on Highway 32 about a mile from that spot. And then that bicycle and foot trail it's the old roadbed that takes you right to that spot there. A fire went through there, I think, 3 or 4 years ago, and really did a job on the vegetation, but it's still open to bike and foot travel. So a little further up the road, the 10 Mile House, you can see here, this is a 1920 picture, so the automobile has come to the road at this point, but it looks pretty crude. Supposedly there was a hotel here. The biggest thing was water available here. Per head of animal and per person you paid for the water. Often it had to be hauled out of springs on both sides of the ridgetop and brought up there to be sold there. So the 10 Mile House, these linden trees, these were not native trees to the California foothill landscape. These had been planted there in the heyday of the 10 Mile House. So today you can go to that same site. There's those linden trees there. And today this is called the Green Gate, where that's really the upper end of Bidwell Park, and you can access the bike and foot trails there that go down into the park here from the Green Gate, with this big parking lot right there at the 10 Mile House. Again, as we would plod up the road, again, you can really glimpse what that must have been like there. The dust, oh baby. And of course, people tried to wear protective clothing that would filter out the dust, and women had very elaborate veils that would tie into their hats. But we hear it was only modestly effective. But here, we can see ahead one of the most famous spots, the 14 Mile House. There was an original smaller hotel here, but in the probably about 1898, 99, the Lucas family acquired this site, and they would run it, and it would be the most popular stopping spot on the Humboldt Road. This bigger building was put into place by the Lucas family, and it was said that Grandma Lucas was the best cook on the Humboldt Road, and one of the reasons why people really scheduled their stops to stop here. And again, as you zoom by on the highway, you might notice this sign here telling us about the history there at the 14 Mile House, at the Humboldt Highlands subdivision, 14 Mile House Drive here. And again, just a blab on that 14 Mile House. And again, this spot had a very active spring of fresh water there, which made living here convenient. So on up to Forest Ranch. My dad would say this was the barn we were playing on. Here's the hotel at Forest Ranch. And you can see what a going spot this had become. And all of these stopping places had these big barns. You can see that one filled with hay. But of course it was so important to have shelter for your stock animals that were freighting up and down the road in stormy weather. And the barns, of course, were built to pull your wagons right in there and keep them dry there during stormy weather. Where's this spot today? Just right off of Highway 32, right off of Fitzgerald Avenue, I believe. You drop down off the road 100 feet, and there's that same flat there where the old hotel and barns were in days gone by. Right up the road another 4 miles, 4.5, the famous Myron Burdan. Here he is. He liked to call himself the greatest hunter along the ridgetop, and it looks like it might have been true. And there's Myron, and he and his family put Burdans on the old Humboldt Road as a stopping spot. Where was that? Right here where today's Interagency CAL FIRE station is, right 4.5 to 5 miles above Forest Ranch, right on the highway. Then another 4.5 miles would bring you to the West Branch stopping spot. Right this way, you'd drop down into Chico Creek Canyon. If you were to go to the south, about 2 miles. Outdoor dance pavilion. It had little tent cabins. It had a saloon. And so it was a very popular spot. And then another 4.5 to 5 miles, Lomo. Here's the Lomo Hotel. And again, it's got the watering trough here. And I like this picture. Here's the Lomo Saloon. Look at that. Lomo Saloon. What a picture that is. But quite a crew. A U.S. federal census in, I think, the 1890 census showed 57 people living here at Lomo. There was a post office here, and that saloon, the hotel had some groceries there, and it had its barn, of course. And here you can see the old Humboldt Road headed up toward Butte Meadows. Today, you'd turn here to see Highway 32. So this picture again shows us the highway sign. You got to turn to the right to go to Butte Meadows. You got to leave the Humboldt Road there at that point. And today's Deer Creek Highway, a later roadway, comes to the left here and takes you up to the junction of Highway 32 and 36. So, of course, the pull up to Butte Meadows was one of the toughest and steepest grades on the road. Lomo, which we just saw, was about 3,800 feet in elevation, and then you had to pull up to the little summit. It was called the high point on the road before you drop down into Butte Meadows. So there at the little summit, you were up at 4,500 feet. You had to climb up 700 feet of elevation to cross that little summit, and then down into Butte Meadows. Here's again the old Humboldt Road. We're back on it, still on it. Here at Butte Meadows at 4,350, they give the elevation there at population 40. So Butte Meadows, Hotel Butte Meadows again, not very clear, but there it is. Butte Meadows had a string of 5 big hotel buildings, the biggest buildings on the road, because this became the favorite recreational spot along the road. Fire consumed each hotel in turn. I think the last one went down in the early 1930s after that last 5th hotel had been completed, a huge building, and then caught fire in the winter from a stove, and a plugged up stove flew, and down went the hotel building. Again, Butte Meadows begins to be a spot for this. People are now coming out of the valley. There's no air conditioning down here at that point. There's no air conditioning until after World War II, the late 40s and into the 50s. Chico starts to see air conditioning. Before that, we can all probably know what it was like to be down here when one of these Chico hot spells settles in over the valley. So people began to come up here. And again, the Humboldt Road had made it possible, where you could bring a lightweight little buggy pulled by just one animal and come up here. And I like this picture. A number of families would comment on, okay, if you were a family and you had a cabin at Butte Meadows, part of your stay at Butte Meadows would be to go out on the Humboldt Road and get the rocks off the road, because everybody was keenly aware of how bumpy and rocky it was to travel that road. So to make it a touch better, yeah, we'll do it. And in fact, young people were often given jobs. Look, take that big troublesome rock out, dig it out of there, and we'll give you $1. Okay. So the Butte Meadows Improvement Club. And then we'd go on up the road another 6.5 miles to Jonesville. And of course, most of you are aware that this program today was really meant to set the stage for our trip to Jonesville next Saturday. And we were going to go up and see this beautiful building, the only remaining hotel along the road, and then the Dixie Fire. And of course, we have all been aware of that story here, another horror story for our area. I was given this picture today by a cabin owner, Sherry Sommer, who has spent years taking care of our flowers right outside our Chico Museum building here, and I thank her for that. And she was helping to put together that event up to see the hotel. She was up, I believe, yesterday or the day before to visit her cabin after it was again possible to go and see what happened. Fortunately, beyond good fortune, maybe the work of hundreds of firefighters and their mechanized equipment, firefighters created and stopped the fire, created a fire line and stopped it all the way from Butte Meadows down to Butte Meadows, all the way from Jonesville to Butte Meadows, a good 5 to 6 miles. Today, if you look at the map of the Dixie Fire, it came right here, coming down this way. But Sherry says, yes, when she visited her place there, if you come in on the road, you could not see a sign of the fire. So again, it must have been close, but the firefighters held the line there. So, again, Jonesville, a beautiful building. We believe at this point that this hotel building was not the original building at this site. This was an original 1864 stopping place on the road with a man named Campbell who ran the spot here. At times he kept 40 oxen on site here in order to trample down the snow going up over the summit and down to Big Meadows, today's Lake Almanor, trying to keep the road open in the wintertime. Again, we're pretty firm that about 1887, this two-story building was in place. Possibly that original hotel structure had been expanded. But again, a number of historic photographs show us about Jonesville. We can imagine, though, by the mid to late 1900s, that old building was wearing thin. It had never been put on a solid foundation, just rounds of wood and piles of rock, and now those had all settled and shifted, and the siding on the building was rotting. And so the cabin owners here at Jonesville, there's a 115-acre parcel of private land here, and that allows for 47 cabins on those 115 acres, and those cabin owners also own this building. And so they committed themselves to a restoration of this old structure. I read here in this Chico News and Review article, $200,000 to jack the hotel building up and get a foundation under it, paid for by fundraising and by contributions, probably the cabin owners contributing a good part of it. That was completed, and then another 10 years has restored the building to a beautiful, beautiful landmark historic structure here in Butte County. It's difficult to think of another structure here in Butte County with more history than this one. And so this was the building we were going to look at. Now the inside has been restored. And our Chico History Museum group was able to go up and preview, and the inside has been restored beautifully. Upstairs, what, 4 bedrooms, I believe, and maybe 2 downstairs. And then a large dining room, general use room, a nice kitchen. Again, Jonesville, the barn. A number of historic photos show that barn here at Jonesville. Here it is again. That barn is still here today, of course, and again, survived the Dixie Fire. This barn is very possibly original to the earliest days of the Humboldt Road. Again, this is just a beautiful spot here, and we're all disappointed that our visit to this spot fell through. But again, a beautiful mountain meadow right at 5,000 feet here, 5,033 feet above sea level. This had been the spot for heavy teams to stop and rest for a night before going up over the Humboldt summit. Quite a number of historic photos were taken on primarily this big rock that was such a prominent rock there at Jonesville. That too is still there today. So from Jonesville, you'd head up over the Humboldt summit at 6,660 feet, with Humboldt Peak at 7,087 feet, just within sight of the actual road crossing of the summit. So this was the summit for the Sierra Cascade spine of mountains right through our area here. And it was quite a pull up to the top, as we all can imagine. And then you drop down steep on the other side into a series of big mountain meadows. And it became known as Rufas, R-U-F-F-A, Rufas. 2 Swiss-Italian immigrants, Louis and Charlie Rufa, had come in here early. They were dairymen with their families in Europe, having been dairy people. So the Rufas put together quite a dairy operation in here with milk and cheese and dairy products, which they sold all up and down the Humboldt Road. They built their own Summit Hotel, or halfway house it was called, about halfway from Chico to Susanville. This burned down in 1943 when some deer hunters here in the area late in the fall got caught by a big winter storm, went inside and tried to start a fire when there was no stove left in the building anymore, and the place burned down. Again, Rufus teaming along the old Humboldt Road. You can see those team bells again here. And then down into Big Meadows. Today, Big Meadows has really left our vocabulary, but of course this is today's Lake Almanor. And this was, by historic accounts, one of the true wonderland spots in early California. It was a knockdown, flat-out, beautiful mountain meadow, 15 miles long by 3 miles wide, with water pouring down all the way around the meadow. You can see today's Lassen Park and Lassen Peak here. So of course the runoff there out of Lassen Park comes right down into Big Meadows as the North Fork of the Feather River. The biggest arm of the Feather starts right here, right there on the shoulder of today's Lassen Park and down into Big Meadows. So it was a wonderland. Again, quickly this became a spot for white-skinned people. It's said that earlier native California people had spent the winter here, had been able to winter over in Big Meadows, but quickly that was taken away, and resorts and cattle grazing settled in here at Big Meadows. Prattville became the single biggest community along the Humboldt Road before you would reach Susanville, and that was right on the edge of the meadow. Again, just some historic shots there from Big Meadows showing people. There were several large resorts and attracting people from all over, not just California, not just Northern California. This became a go-to spot for recreation, for camping. And then from there it was another 30 miles on to Susanville. And there you could tie in to the existing wagon roads across Nevada and out into that area of the Humboldt mines. Again, just a freight wagon in those early days. So again, just to review, a map, here's Chico, on up to Susanville, this now constructed Humboldt wagon road. You tie into the existing roadway out in here to Nevada, the Humboldt mines, and all the way up here to Ruby City and Silver City in today's Idaho. It looked good for the Humboldt Road, looked really good. 1865, the road's ready for stagecoach travel. Several pack trains had been across the road already. Now stagecoaches are going to take people from Chico up to Susanville and all the way into Idaho. That first run in July of 1865 took 16 days from Chico to Ruby City in Idaho. 1 year later, after the kinks were really ironed out along the road, that same trip, Chico to Ruby City, 3 days and 5 hours. So really we can see where you could get over the mountains and out into Nevada in just a couple of days. Of course, freight wagons moving slow, probably longer. Looked good. Everything seemed to be in place, but those investors had failed to reckon with this, what was coming down the track toward wagon travel. In 1861, the United States government gave sanction and subsidy to the formation of two large corporate organizations, the Union Pacific Railroad starting in Omaha, Nebraska and coming west, and the Central Pacific from Sacramento and going to go east, and they're going to meet somewhere, wherever they can get to and meet up. So by 1867, after the Central Pacific here in California hires 12,000 Chinese to come over from China and really get the job of going up and over the Sierra Nevada mountain range there at Donner. By 67, that had been accomplished. And now by 1868, the train is out to Winnemucca, Nevada, and long-term transport of supplies and people goes to the railroad. You might think, well, yeah, the Humboldt Road is going to die. But no, not so. So we're going to run through this. There were several things that kept the road open. One of the first was the movement of stock animals up and down the road. Most of us now have come to a point where we don't even remember how this valley was ringed with large stock ranches. From the earliest days of white habitation here in the valley, raising cows, selling them for meat and for their hides that turned into leather in the days before plastic. This was all important. And so ranchers had large herds of animals. In the springtime, after the grass was drying up here in the valley and foothills, the herds would be taken up to their summer pastures in the mountains, and then in the fall they would come back down. The same for sheep. Meat and wool. In the days before synthetic fabrics, wool was about the best material you could get, the most durable and the best in wet weather. So here you see a herd of sheep right there at that Jonesville barn. But here is really the story of what held the Humboldt Road in place. Now, with access to the mountains, you could begin to cut down trees and transport the wood down to the valley where the real markets were. And it's important, again, all important. I could go on to some kind of preachment here, but I'm going to try to refrain. But it's important to remember what our California mountains were in prehistoric days, where there was a natural fire regime in place that had been there for thousands of years, where fire would start probably by lightning. Those earlier times, most of those fires were low intensity, creeping fires that would go through the mountain landscape and burn up the dead wood on the ground. But these large mature trees had their beautiful bark skins that partly were made there and put there to insulate and protect the tree from fire. And so there was this natural fire regime that really was in place, and it's said that our California pine forests were the finest pine forests in the world. And you can look at that tree there and go, wow, that's big. Well, you can imagine that those were worth a lot of money. And so immediately by 1860, our history says there were something like 30 steam-powered sawmills in Butte County, most of them in the Feather River drainage, but really here this picture, this artist sketch was put together by an artist hired to go just east out of Chico and sketch the lumbering industry in the late 1860s. So you can look at this and see the size of that piece of wood, and then we can all wonder what that was like to try to move that thing onto that carriage, and then you're gonna just move that thing through that big exposed double-bitted saw. Oh baby, it doesn't look too safe. And again, by the same artist, a second sketch showing us just how dangerous that must have been, moving those big pieces of wood around, and maybe just a glimpse of what that California forest land might have looked like. Again, moving this down wood was a Herculean task for people and animals. Here you see the Forest Ranch, a hotel there on the Humboldt Road. But really a revolution is coming. It's already here. Steam power. Steam power, of course, first invented, I guess, in England in the middle 1700s, mainly to try to pump water out of coal mines. But certainly this mechanical power now, the first real machine power that people put together for ourselves here on our planet, quickly comes across the ocean and is quickly put onto boats, locomotives, and anything that could be powered. Here, this steam donkey, it's called. It's just a big winch. You can see the big stem there that would wind up a cable, wind the cable in by steam power, and you could drag these big logs around. Of course, the steam donkeys were put on skids where you could just skid it around the mountains and use it. Again, whoops. Again, soon, little narrow gauge railroads. This one right here in the bottom of Chico Creek Canyon, just 25 miles upstream from where we are now. A large-scale industrial, a corporate mill here at this point, the Providence Mill, or West Branch Mill as it was known, right in the bottom of Chico Creek. Here it is. You can see some of these long troughs. What are those? Part of this. This flume system, which was put into place 1872-73 from Chico Meadows, just a mile away from Butte Meadows, all the way down to Chico. It's a flume not to float logs, but instead rough cut boards. You can see them floating down the flume there. And so they'd cut up those big pieces of trunk there in the mountains, rough cut them up into boards, send them down the flume, take them out right here in Chico, where Chico had a very, very large and prominent wood industry early on. One of the most important things that elevated Chico beyond Los Molinos and Gridley and some of the smaller valley towns that never really got too far off the ground. But Chico had this large lumber industry where these boards would be dried and made into doors and windows and siding and shingles and boxes, all kinds of stuff. Dr. Newton Enlow had his first hospital right there at that West Branch Mill that we saw down in the bottom of the canyon. Here's Dr. Enlow here with his young son Newty, or Little Newt as he was called. Again, we try to zoom in and see Enlow's name. You can't still quite make it out. But he was hired by the Sierra Lumber Company to be the company doctor, had his first hotel here, his first hospital here, and then I think in 1902, as the Sierra Lumber Company faded and Diamond Match moved into the Chico area, Dr. Enlow came down to Chico and had his first hospital there on Flume Street. But now people were building permanent homes along the Humboldt Road. There were families and agriculture being put into place along the road right here in Forest Ranch. Children who needed to go to school. In 1878, Forest Ranch gets its first school right here, and it gets its first post office. In order to get a federal post office, you had to declare, okay, what's the name of your spot? It's at that point that Forest Ranch is used as the place for this new post office. Other names, Forest, had been used earlier, and also the last names of some of the people who had ran the hotel there at Forest Ranch. Now it becomes Forest Ranch. And now we come to this spot, the car along the road. Here's that same spot we saw earlier, that same prominent rock, and you can see the Humboldt Road there, let's say 1912, 1915. Supposedly the first car in Butte County, 1905. So we can guess it took a number of years for that car to gain sophistication. I've seen a picture of that first one. It was just an old wagon bed with a little gasoline-powered engine on the back. But now we've got cars. And of course, here's one thing I did want to say. As we look at this program here today, I think the importance of it in seeing this flow of time and seeing this change of technology and culture, it's so important, I think, to see that just within the lifetime of my grandmother, she grew up before that. She was born in 1880 right here in Chico in a world of horses and mules and cattle. And I knew her well. She was alive until I was 23. So again, this swept into her world, what that must have been like. Her older brother, born along the Humboldt Road in 1872, out at the Bell Ranch, he had grown up in that world of mules and getting up at 4 in the morning to go out to your mule barn and get your mules ready to hitch up to your equipment. He buys a car later on, and it's so frustrating to him, he parks it in the barn and never goes back to it. So again, what a transition we're seeing here. And you can see, I saw those two up there. And so, again, the car on the Humboldt Road. So there was this period where both the wagon and the car were on the road. There are personal accounts of the horses spooking from the clatter and the clank and the bang of some backfire, and wagons careening off the road. But really, teaming on the road now is on the way out. And of course, the car that we've all grown up with and know nothing beyond, that's become the method of travel. So we're approaching the end of my program. We're here at the year about 1900. The car is coming into our world. 3 big events happen here in Butte County that are going to impact the Humboldt Road. The first, Diamond Match sweeps into Chico, 1903, builds a huge plant right here in South Chico, and they build a state-of-the-art lumber mill at Sterling City. There's nothing there in this little mountain meadow before Diamond comes in and builds this. And so Diamond builds a railroad all the way from their plant in South Chico to here. They're taking wood after it's sawed up here. They take it down to the manufacturing facilities here in Chico. Diamond Match. Big Meadows is going to be dammed up. Hydroelectric electricity now is a rage here in California. Everybody wants to develop it. Electricity, no more kerosene lamps. And so speculators and corporate interests now move up through the Feather River Canyon, and they secure options and ownership of critical spots. And they move into Big Meadows, and they don't reveal what the plan is here. We'd like to buy your cattle ranch. We'd like to be cattlemen too. Okay. And so they pretty much bought up all those cattle interests and then started to build their dam. Caused quite a stir, quite a commotion, quite a controversy. The dam went ahead. 1914, it's finished. Big Meadows is flooded. Prattville, which had been just right back in this little cove here, is flooded out. It had been the prominent community along the road. Chester rises up from this moment. Okay, Prattville's gone. Chester, we're down here at the north end of the lake. We'll build a store here. We'll build a new building, a new hotel here. Chester really rises up to become the prominent community along the road. This last picture, 1930. People see that we need a better road over that high Sierra crest. Lassen National Park has been put into place there, 1916. People want to go and see the park. They need a better road to get there. So in 1930, the Deer Creek Highway is put into place. Started in 1930. The Depression is just starting to settle in on the United States. Soon, the Depression era Work Projects Administration and the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, will spend 5 years and put today's Deer Creek Highway into place. 38 miles of new road where you don't have to go up over that high 6,600 foot elevation to get up there beyond the mountains. So that was the thinking there. This is just a picture I had, and it's an interesting story. It's just showing how that new bridge at Deer Creek Meadows was washed out. The road is finished in 1935. In 1936, one of the most historic floods in Valley history takes place. And we'll find this of interest. In December of 1936, there's 10.5 feet of snow at Butte Meadows. Over there at the Boy Scout camp, it's just been completed. Their beautiful new lodge has just been completed, and it collapses from snow up on the roof. And then, in late December, one of those warm Pineapple Express storms comes in off the Pacific and across California, torrential rains, melting all of that snow, and downhill all that water went. And it washed out all the bridges in the valley on Highway 99. Chico was stranded for quite a while there, couldn't go up or down the valley. But again, it destroyed quite a bit of the road and had to be replaced there on this new Deer Creek Highway. Diamond Match would bring large-scale industrial capacities into the mountains, full-gauge railroads. In 1936, Diamond would put a railroad from Sterling City across into Butte Meadows. And Diamond would put together their Butte Meadows camp here. And so this was here all the way into my lifetime, into the 1950s. This was a seasonal camp. And again, logging went on full blast all the way along the Humboldt Road. We're here at the old West Branch stop, and the Humboldt Road is going right through there somewhere. You got railroad signs to stop there on the Humboldt Road. And I put this picture in here. Diamond had a second camp right at the West Branch, right by that West Branch stop on the Humboldt Road. If you were to go 2 miles south off of today's highway, you'd come to the West Branch of Butte Creek. And there, Diamond had quite a large seasonal camp. Well, the Depression settles in, and people don't have a place to go. I can't move down out of here. I'll stay the winter. So there was quite a number of people here that spent the winter at these small little Diamond shelters, houses that had been built and put in place here. And again, it's interesting to see the smiles on these people's faces. How can that be? Aren't they lusting to get down to their 2,500 square foot house there with the internet connectivity? No, they look like they're satisfied and content and maybe even happy. Yeah, technology is shifting. Logs are being moved by logging trucks. Up and down the road, the Chico stage line is running daily automobiles. You look, yeah, okay, somebody had a little taxi that they went up and down the road. No, we had a whole fleet of taxis here. And here they're parked right here, right at First and Main Street with the old Bidwell pavilion and warehouse there still in place right there at the bridge, right across from the mansion. And so people are going up and down the road. It's still unpaved. I threw this in there to show, again, improvement that continues to take place right through our world. Here, the Humboldt Road only had 2 streams it had to cross between Chico and Susanville. Butte Creek, right there above today's Outpost store, and the North Fork of the Feather at Big Meadows. So here you see the Dodge family out of Forest Ranch. They've contracted to put a bridge across that spot there at Butte Meadows. And here's that spot where the bridge still goes across today. And you can see they just used big wooden log bracing there. And then sometime later, this improved steel bridge was put into place. And then the bridge we have today. The road's going to get paved, 1939. My dad would talk about. My dad was born in 1914. One of the most important things in his whole his entire life was his association with the Boy Scouts of America. His own father had died when he was just 9, and so the Boy Scouts offered a male connectivity. The Boy Scout program here had a very influential and effective leader, Harry Ogle, and my dad had a very positive and influential scouting experience. By the time the Boy Scout camp was built in 1934, there at Chico Meadows, 1 mile from Butte Meadows, right, using the Humboldt Road as access, my dad was 20. He's still an adult. He's an adult now. He's still active with the Scouts. He's helping to build the camp. He's driving the old camp truck up and down the road, and he would often talk about, in the days before it was paved, bringing dynamite up from Chico and the blasting caps. This would really give him a nervousness there as you clattered around on that Humboldt Road there and hoping that nothing blew. But again, we're just about there at the end. We can glimpse, okay, now you're going to move logs down out of the mountains on that new paved road, the Humboldt Road. Here it is in this Chico Enterprise record photo of 1964. We can imagine how unsafe that is. As this big truck goes around the corner, those logs are going to swing out over the oncoming traffic. And so people are calling for a completely redone upgrade for the Humboldt Road. And sure enough, that's put into place. Planning was conducted and concluded in the late 1950s. The first phase of 4 phases of reconstruction take place by 1964. And we can see here in this picture what's happened. Remember that before 1964, the state highway route from Hamilton City, today's Highway 32, coming into Chico, came down Nord Avenue, and then it turned and came right down First Street, right in front of Kendall Hall there, right through what today is Chico State. Chico State, then just those 3 main buildings, really, Kendall and Trinity and Laxon. So Highway 32 came right down through Chico and then went down to the junction and got on Humboldt Road right there at the junction. And here you can see the old road coming out of Chico here and snaking up through the foothills and headed for 10 Mile House. So this first phase, 5 miles out of Chico, you've rerouted 8th and 9th Streets in Chico, and you've taken it on down Nord Avenue and then Walnut and turn on 8th and 9th, come down into the junction, go through that junction on 8th and 9th, and then out here heading east. It's an interesting map. You can see Bruce Road here. California Park, of course, fills in all of that right there. And you can see the old city dump here where I can remember, yeah, you just go out there and dump your stuff. And of course the Chico Mall over in here somewhere. And the old Humboldt Road. What a difference that makes there. Of course, with this kind of power, to rearrange the landscape, the old Humboldt Road had simply followed the curvature of the landscape. Now you can really rearrange things. Whoops, we're right there at the end. Okay, here we go. Here at Forest Ranch, you can put this kind of power into place here and really create something new. Forest Ranch with Nopel Avenue crossing right here. And my great-grandfather with that little cabin back here on that side of the road. Again, leaving us this highway today. And again, I think this is basically the last picture I've got. Again, I would just really want to suggest a couple of things. I want to say first, after my co-author Marty Lester and I finished our book in 2011 and we started to shop our book around and present like this. And after one of the first presentations we made, a Machupta Indian from right here in Chico came up to me and said, "You know, that's only part of the story." And I go, "Yeah, I know." So I did not really mention the downside of this story. I tried to touch on the lumbering story that I believe has rearranged the forest landscape, created a new natural world regime there with a different mix of trees and sizes. Fire suppression, you can point to the Forest Service and say it's them, but no. We can all imagine along that Humboldt Road, Mr. and Mrs. Jones did not want to see a fire come through their new barn and their split rail fence that they had spent $1,000 for putting into place along the road. No, we're going to stop any fire that happens here. We don't want a fire going and burning our cabin at Butte Meadows. Fire suppression, I'm going to suggest, came out of our own private property ethic that we brought into place here in California, and we took the natural fire regime out of place, and we've got a mess now, and we're not sure what we're going to do about that. So again, we want to look at this bigger picture. I will conclude by saying we've seen here during these last several years a real challenge to our storyline that has been the prominent American storyline. There are racial components, there are environmental components, there are wealth components to all of that, and cultural components. I believe that's appropriate that we take a new look, for our science has given us a clearer picture of what went on in the past. Now we want to look at it and try to see a more accurate storyline of how we got from there to here, in order that we try to make some changes and give ourselves some positive, stable footing going forward. So really, I am going to, oh, I did have these. That's where I was going to give all of this blab. So sure, yeah, there's remnants of that. There's remnants of the old road. The ruts right out of Chico. If you get off the road up out of Forest Ranch, you can see these spots where, whoops, and this is not going to take very long. Come on, where's that back arrow? You can see pieces of pavement there where the road was there at one point, and then somebody saw a better way and rerouted the road. You can still see spots like this if you turn off today's Highway 32 and there's several little sections of the road where people now have built houses back in here. And I can remember this spot from my boyhood, Robber's Roost, where my dad would tell us, yeah, robbers would hide up there and they'd jump down onto the wagons and commit a robbery. The old water trough there at Forest Ranch off today's highway. So again, we can glimpse these remnants of this earlier story. And we're left with this one today, where again we can see yesterday and today, and of course we want to put a little bit of a focus on tomorrow. So really, that is that. Thank you. Thank you. I don't know if we want to take any time for questions there. If anybody really has anything, you could talk to me afterward there. But I really thank you all for coming out today. Really thank everyone for coming out. And I took my mask off because I myself have really a hard time understanding through the mask, and I have had both my vaccinations there, and I think I believe in that, and So going forward, let's see what we can do. Very good.